If you're like most homebrewers who make mead, you probably have a million containers with like that much honey in them. So you know what? We're gonna make a mead. I'm gonna call this one Leftover Step Feed Mead, because that's what we're gonna do. So we have all these leftover honeys, and we're just gonna make something with all of them. It's more of a traditional, it's gonna be a pretty simple mead really, but it's really just to get the point across it. You know, mix and match, it's okay.
But because we're using leftovers, which are pretty hard to get out of their containers thoroughly, we're going to use a gravity reading as our measurement of how much honey rather than a weight. Because this way, particularly in this one that's all crystallized, we can add hot water, shake it all up, get it dissolved, and then dump it in, and not have to worry, oh wait, we didn't get the measurement on that, because we'll get a gravity measurement.
We just had a knock sighting. He smelled my fingers, and I have to wash my hands again.
All right.
I feel like a surgeon. Okay, so one of the first things that I want to do, though, is get our yeast started. And for this, I'm going to use Lalvin EC1118 yeast. I'm not even going to mess around.
Did you pour water in your...
I did not yet. I'm going to in just a moment.
All right.
I'm going to use the whole packet. Just dump it right in. I'm using a Pyrex because we are going to hydrate this sucker to see if this yeast is alive. We didn't always do that, but we had some bad yeast, so we're testing it now. Just going to pour in some tepid water, it's room temperature. Then using the whisk of unusually small size, also known as the wuss, I'm just going to give it a whiskey whisk. Just want to mix it up. That's what should happen if these yeast are alive, is it should create a foam dome. It should make foam. It should, you know, show some activity of some kind.
Do something!
I know, right? So, as Derica said, we're not actually going to be weighing the honey today, but we are still going to give you an idea of where it's at because we're going to use gravity readings. Much more effective, actually. It's a more precise way to do it, because this way you can make a 1 gallon, 2 gallon, 5 gallon, 2.465 gallon batch, and it'll all work out the same if you go to the same gravity reading.
So we have a pitcher over here that's room temperature water, and then we have a pitcher over there that's recently boiled water.
Yeah, it's hot, so I'm just going to pour some into this. I mean, you've all seen this trick. This is not really... Try not to knock everything over. I have a million things over here today. Okay, this bottle right here is the reason why we're not weighing anything, because there's like a teaspoon of honey in there. But it never gets used because you'd have to wait like an hour and a half for it to get to the thing, to pour it out, to put it into your tea or whatever you're going to use it in. So this is so much easier. See, look at that. It's all off the bottom now. I'm just going to dump that. It's hot. Just gonna, whoa, it's still hot.
Yeah.
Just going to dump that right in there. See, this is, you're going to get to watch me burn myself.
Now it's done.
Yeah. All right, next we have, this is some Kirkland wildflower honey with just a little bit in the bottom. I don't know how much that is. You know, I know there was 5 pounds in here originally, but what's in here now? I don't know.
Now, ideally, when you're pouring it into plastic bottles in particular,
You want to be careful.
you probably want it to let it cool
It's not
slightly.
boiling, it's just hot.
But you still want it to be warm so that it'll dissolve the honey so you can get the honey out.
But this is YouTube.
That's the whole point
So-
of this.
We do it differently. I don't know, that made sense in my head. Let off some pressure. I'm also aerating the heck out of this as we go, so there will be no bejesus left by the time we get to the final stages. Don't fear the foam. All right.
Let's do the crystallized one first,
Sure.
because that one's
So we have some crystallized honey here. Let me show you just how crystallized this is. I mean, look at that. Even the crystals have crystals. You know, it's just seriously crystallized honey. So it would never get used for much of anything else. We'll use it for this.
This is the sourwood honey from Tennessee that I think we were gifted. Yeah, we were gifted this. And we actually did a video where we compared this with 2 other different types of honey, and this was one of our favorite honeys of that experiment. So I'm really happy that we're actually getting to use it, even though it's thoroughly crystallized.
This is like nuts. The water's not that hot. But the honey is just that the honey is just that crystallized that it's just stuck everywhere. That lid does not
It is not
like the pressure.
enjoying this experience at all. But that illustrates a good point that I would like to mention now that I have the opportunity, and that's fermenting in mason jars. You don't want to ferment in a mason jar or put a carbonated beverage in a mason jar because mason jars are made for canning. And if you are familiar with canning, canning creates kind of a vacuum environment. So it's pressure coming from the outside in because it's sucked out everything from the inside. So it's forcing to not crack under the outside pressure of the atmosphere.
Right.
Whereas
the jars are made to hold pressure this way.
Fermentation is creating gas and carbonation as well.
Sounds so nuts.
Is creating pressure from the inside pushing out. So mason jars, and particularly their lids, are not designed for that distribution of pressure, and they're probably going to fail, aka explode.
This is going to take a while. I'm just going to do this one, and then we'll be back. Okay, that other one is sitting in a timeout in the corner and thinking about what it's done. It was so crystallized at the bottom that it wouldn't come out. So what we're actually doing, it's harmful to the honey, but we had to microwave it, okay? Because, well, we're trying to make a video today, not like tomorrow. So that one had some hot water sitting in it and it's going in the microwave. But what we're gonna do here, this is some pure American, I believe this is wildflower honey.
I think so. I know it's from Oregon.
It was sent by Jeremy Burke in Oregon, and there's just this much left in it, so we're going to use it up. It's not actually crystallized, it's just a remnant. There's just not much there, so I'm going to use it up.
It's leftover.
Leftovers. Pouring honey has to be the least exciting content you can put on YouTube. And then it's sticky, and it just goes everywhere, and like, see, I can't even get it to stop. Stop! It just goes to another side, because there's still too much coming out.
What are you trying to do?
I'm trying to stop so I can put hot water in this and just get everything out at once.
Okay.
And it's not working. There we go. See? Like that. I'm out of water.
You want some of this water in there?
Yeah, that should work. It's not hot, but it'll work. Maybe. The honey's still running through?
Yeah.
Wow, that's some thick honey. But to me, this is a great way to just use up leftover honey that you have and still make something that you might like. You can also just use the remnants to sweeten things. The problem is if you have to add water to get it out, now you're diluting. So it's not necessarily great for that unless you know you need to dilute. I'm making that face because the funnel's kind of full now.
Nope.
I wasn't going to do it.
Give it to me.
All right, my hands are so sticky right now. Be back. Okay, so while this is still pouring in and we're still heating up the other one, I'm just gonna grab like a spoon or so of this honey liquid that we have here. Not a lot. It's just honey water. And I'm putting that into the yeast. Just give it a little something to get started because it didn't look like they're doing a whole lot yet. And I'm not ready to call it, so give them another chance. Okay. There's some coaxing in the microwave. The jar is really, really hot. So I'm wearing a flame retardant glove because it was really hot. But it did mix up fully. Beautifully well, actually. So I'm just going to dump this in. Got some lovely steam coming off this. It's also really warm, which means we're not pitching yeast yet. Because if we pitch yeast now, we'll kill them. So I'm just going to pour some water in here and make sure everything is really mixed up well, and that will also cool it off. And of course, I have to spill some. If your funnel sits perfectly like that, it's going to create a lock, and it makes that happen. Not really a whole lot else going in here, except
nutrients.
Well, nutrients for one. So I'm going to add 10 grams of fermented dough. If you're wondering why we use 10 grams, it's because it works. If you're using any other nutrient but fermented O, I would recommend using the manufacturer's suggestions or finding some online source to get the right amount because there's no urea or diammonium phosphate in this. So basically you can use as much as you want. It doesn't hurt anything. I mean, you know, within reason. You don't want to like fill it halfway because it's kind of not that appetizing. But 10 grams in a little bit of water. I'm going to rinse out the funnel.
Do you want to put the next dry ingredient in? Because you'll have to rinse out the funnel then.
I'm going to put in the next dry ingredient. and then rinse out the funnel. So this is pretty simple, but we are going to be adding wine tannin. If you don't want to use wine tannin, the powdered stuff, which is basically just powdered oak extract, if you don't want to use that, you can just use a cup of strong black tea. No worries there. The black tea of your choice. And if you want to use some tea that isn't black, like a green tea actually has quite a bit of tannins in it too, you can totally do that. If you want to use Earl Grey and have it taste like bergamot, sure. If you want to use some herbal tea, well, that's where I would say you're probably not going to get the tannic effect that you might want, so no.
Unless it's an herbal blend that has black and or green tea in it, then you should be fine.
I'm using a rounded half teaspoon of our powdered wine tannin. Why a rounded half teaspoon? Because that's how it came out of the jar. The lid doesn't let you do anything but a rounded teaspoon. So there we go. Now I gotta get all that in there. Getting kind of full. Okay, at this point, I want to give this a really good mix.
Do you require the thumb saver bung?
I would like the thumb saver bung, yes.
All right, let's see if I can find it. I do not know where the thumb saver bung is currently.
So I'm using a regular bung. That's
so
okay.
we are sacrificing Brian's thumb to the brewing gods.
It's mostly a joke. It's just, you know, when you put your thumb over the hole, after a while that can kind of hurt. That's all. That's it. It's not that big of a deal. And I'm aerating this. Somebody actually questioned whether you can actually add oxygen into something in a closed environment like this. And at first I was like, well, yeah, of course you can. Then I thought about what they were actually asking. We're not taking into account that there is air in here. That's air. So I'm trying to force some of that air into the brew. So yes, you absolutely can. Will you get a lot? I don't know. I mean, there's still air in there, so I don't know. But has it never failed us? I don't know. We don't get a whole lot of sulfide smells in our brews, so I guess we do okay. I mean, I don't have a proper answer for that question, you know? Damn it, Jim, I'm a brewer, not a scientist. That's the proper answer. I don't have anything better. Okay, so I checked the temperature off camera. It's 104 degrees Fahrenheit, which is something Celsius right here, which means we are safe to put in our yeast. You want to be under 120 degrees, because at 120 degrees, they die. Preferably, I like to be closer to 100 or below. Our yeast foamed up slightly. I think adding that little bit of honey helped them just a bit. They liked it.
Now this is the yeast that we bought from our local homebrew shop, so it isn't the one that traveled through Amazon.
Yeah, so we knew it was pretty good.
So yeah.
I'm going to add just a touch more water, not a lot, or do I?
You're going to add more mead, or more honey.
Eventually, but I want to rinse out the funnel.
Okay.
So just a couple drops more water just to rinse out the funnel. And now, give it another mixy mix. By the way, everything that we used here was sanitized in. Because sanitization is like the first step. It's really important. I mean, you got to know what you're making first, so I guess that's really the first step. But after that, you want all your gear to be clean. Now, we're not talking See, it spits at you. We're not talking sterilized, we're talking sanitized. That's different. We're killing off most of the things that can cause an infection in your brew. Does sanitizing guarantee you won't get an infection?
No.
No. Does not sanitizing guarantee you will get an infection?
No.
No. It's sort of somewhere in between. It's called best practices. It's one of those, do the best you can in hopes that nothing bad happens. That's it. That's all there is to it. Now I'm going to take a specific gravity reading. This is our original gravity. This will tell me approximately where we're at. I honestly don't even have an estimate for this one. I had said off camera before we started I was shooting for like a 1.080 starting, but who knows? This could be 1.020 for all I know. It could be higher. It's apparently higher than that. So let's see, where are we? Let me get rid of some bubbles so I can verify that. Would you believe me if I said it was 1.078? 2 points away from where I had thought it might be, based on my estimate of all the honey that we had sitting around. It's always fun when that happens. I also have to write that down, don't I?
Yes, you do.
And I'm pouring the sample back in because some people don't, but I'm not some people. Due to the aforementioned sanitizing, this was clean.
Today's date is November 1st. Our original
This
gravity.
is a crappy pen.
It's your Pilot G2.
Really? This is a crappy version of it. It's not mine. It's
Right.
a Pilot
Okay,
G2.
well, find your flag pen.
No, it's done now. I already wrote it. Okay, so what's left? Airlock, right?
Right.
Can you just put that back in sanitizer?
Sure.
I had it sitting out. It's got honey all over it.
Sticky.
It's sticky. My hands are sticky again. So the yeast we used, in case we didn't mention it, was EC1118. It's an 18% champagne-style yeast. It's known to be a very strong fermenter. It, in my opinion, is not the greatest thing to make mead with, but it's this far away. Like, it's a good yeast, okay? Don't get me wrong. It just, there are ones that I would prefer, but I wanted something that was really robust and really strong because I'm hoping that I can just keep adding remnants of honey to this and get this up to a pretty high number. That's the goal. It's a step feed, right? But anyway, what are we gonna do with this now?
We're gonna let it sit, and we're gonna let it sit on a tray with lips, so that way if it decides to explode out the airlock, they'll be caught in that tray and not all over my kitchen.
Now, for the first couple days, if it starts to get up in your airlock, all you have to do is clean out the airlock, replace it with either like a cheap spirits, like, you know, Scoresby Scotch, or you can use mixed up sanitizer fluid. Don't use straight sanitizer fluid, mixed up stuff, if you had any laying around. We don't always have it laying around, so that's why we use Scoresby. But if it becomes too tiresome to do that all the time, you can just pull this airlock out of here and use a piece of tubing, run into a mason jar filled with either sanitizer fluid. I wouldn't put Scoresby in there. That's a waste of even that. And just plain old water, because the idea is you want the gases to come out, but you don't want bugs to get in. I don't think a bug's going to swim through an entire mason jar up the tube, and it's just not going to happen. So not as much of a worry. That's for the first few days. It's kind of cumbersome to keep around, so that's why I don't like to do it too much. But, you know, hey, if you have to, you have to. It prevents too much loss, because what'll happen is if this gets clogged up, if you get too much stuff up in there, it will shoot up. I've seen pictures of airlocks stuck in ceilings, of eruptions like Mount Vesuvius style, of spray 10 feet in the air. So it's important. And please, no matter what you do, do not put a cap on this and tighten it down. Don't do that. Just don't. Get an airlock. If you've gone through this much trouble to make this mead so far, get a $3 airlock. Or use the tubing and jar trick. It's the same thing. There's still an airlock, technically. Okay, I'll get off the soapbox now, and we're going to put this on a lip tray. It's going to go in the fermentation station for probably a couple of weeks, and we'll be back to do the next step in about 2 seconds.
If you're one of those people that like to watch YouTube and yell at the people that are creating the videos for your pleasure, then welcome to our world, because you're probably like Brian. And what did we do when we made this step feed?
Oh, we screwed up.
We didn't leave room to step feed.
I was wondering where she was going with that. and, oh yeah, now I know what you mean. But anyway, so the airlock has stopped. So we're going to take its first reading too, and then we're going to rack the whole thing into there.
I will show you how to rack without actually racking. In a moment.
We're racking it. But it's, well, yeah, I guess it's not, because racking means to...
Yeah, see? We're racking without racking.
Sorta.
Uh-huh.
All right. Okay. It's going to be one of those days, isn't it? So this is hazy. I'm going to bet it went totally dry. It was only a 1.078 to start, and it's been sitting for 7 days. Took exactly 7 days. I do smell the youngness already. It doesn't smell bad, just, you know, you can smell it.
It just smells young. It's a distinctive odor. If you get used to fermenting honey, you'll recognize it right away and realize it's no big, it's just what it does.
All right, so right now it is sitting at 0.994. Now we used EC1118 on this. It has a potential of 18%. This is nowhere near 18%. I will figure it out in just a moment though. For now, I am actually going to start the process of moving it over. There's plenty of gas bubbles in this still, so I'm not overly concerned with oxidation. However, this is a slight risk. This is why you don't want to do it this way.
So what I mean by racking without racking is typically racking, the process of racking, is to remove the liquid from the sediment. But in this case, we actually want that sediment to be in our new fermentation station.
Because we don't want to have to rebuild our yeast colony over. So I am shaking this up in hopes of getting everything stirred up in there.
So you got to kind of be vigorous with it.
But again, it's degassing at the same time. So this is a calculated risk type of situation, okay? That's why when I say you don't want to do it this way, what I meant is you don't want to start it here and then have to move it the whole fermentation. We don't really want to do this, but it's a case of we have to.
Right, because we want all of our least cake to be introduced back into the solution so that way it all gets into here.
Yep, and I think we're good. Plus, we are still going to be having an active fermentation. So oxygen isn't as big of a worry at this point. It's not really something to be super concerned about.
But we don't want to just dump it in there because then it will definitely oxygenate
Okay,
it.
everything's moving. Let's get going.
Let's go. Go, go, go.
Do it to it. Get that in there.
Put this down here.
I took off the cap.
Because we want it all.
Yep. I'm gonna suck up everything. There's just no way to say this without sounding bad.
Such mega made to suck.
Wow. That is exactly what we never said when we used to use the
Mega Made acronym?
Yep.
Name, whatever.
Yep, I always left it that. If you know, you know. And you just gave it away. We're gonna lose our family.
We're sucking. That's what we're doing. That's exactly what we're doing. There's nothing
Inherently perverse
implied there. This is the actual act.
We'll see in a minute. Some people are going to lose their minds right now. But I am going to pour this last bit of dregs in here because I don't want to lose anything. I want this to be as close to the day that we started it as it can be. Well, if we had started it in the Little Big Mouth Bubbler, I want it to be as close. You know what I mean.
So if you're watching this video and you haven't started this video and you want to follow along with this video,
start in a Little Big Mouth Bubbler.
Yeah.
Or a larger container of some type. All right, but anyway, right now, let's find out. Wrong. I don't want the remote. I want my phone. So I can figure that out. Picked up the remote to stop the camera.
We don't want to do that.
I want to stop the camera. We're still talking to you guys. So right now we are at 1.078 starting gravity minus 0.994 gives us 0.084 for our used up spent stuff times 135 gives me 11.34% ABV already. So
which ain't too shabby.
Yeah. Here's something else I want to do. We're going to use a little bit more math here. If I know that a pound of honey, which we should have about a gallon, so a pound of honey, 0.035, if that was all used up completely, should give me about 4.7% more. Okay, that only brings this to 16%. So we have a little bit of a quandary now. Do we put in the full pound, or do we put in like half to 3/4 of a pound? And let the yeast acclimate as it goes. And here's why I'm saying this. If I put in the full pound now and just bump it up to 16%, we're not likely to get much further. But if I do half a pound now and bump it up to like 13 or 14%, those yeast are going to build up their tolerance, and their tolerance does go up. Their alcohol tolerance does start to go up as you continue doing that. So we could potentially go further. That is the theory. Yes, that is absolutely the theory. So let's go with half a pound of honey today. Using the heavy duty scale, holds up to 50 pounds. Now, this is supposed to be leftover, but, well, this is leftover. We just have a little bit here. It's not quite enough to make a brew with.
And the reason why we're using this rather than our true leftover is our leftovers are crystallized still. So we can't do the hot water trick because then we won't have the right weight.
Right, then we're diluting it. So 227 grams, please. Okay, we got 228 grams. Sorry, that's just the way it's going to be. Now I gotta wash my hands. Okay, now that our honey's in, I want to mix this up. And it's okay if I'm a little bit rough. I don't want to be too rough, though. I do want to just mix it through. I don't think, like I said before, I think it's still degassing so much that I don't think we're going to be able to oxidize this. Plus, it's technically now a primary fermentation again. So a little oxygen ain't so bad.
Well, yeah.
But you want to be careful.
Yeah.
I don't want to go, you know, spraying air into there or anything like that.
We have alcohol present, so you don't want to oxygenate.
We're also in the probably not going to make vinegar zone, so...
Just over the cusp.
For a day or two until this kicks up again.
True.
Now, I know one thing. Even if it doesn't get mixed in fully, the yeast will get to it. We've actually done that before. Yep. We did a no-mix mead, and it worked just fine. It actually came out tasting really, really good. But in this case, I want to take readings so we can be a little bit more accurate. I want to give you a close approximation of what our utmost ABV could be. Now, half pound of honey should be something like 17 points-ish. So added to the 0.994, that should give us like 1.010 to 1.012 right now, which should ferment out pretty quick. But I'm going to take a reading and get a check on that. Reading. I know we take a lot of readings around here, but it's important. It's also, we do more readings because we want to show you guys what's happening. If we were doing this for ourselves, we might not take quite as many, but still a good idea. I mean, a step feed, you really don't need to take them as long as it's going dry. It doesn't really matter if you don't care how much alcohol you're making. All right, our honey's a little bit stronger than the average bear. 1.020. That's interesting.
You want it tilted or?
Tilt it a little bit. That way when I pour, it doesn't, see, no noise.
And that's one of our tricks for limiting oxidization when adding liquids back in, is to tilt it slightly towards where you're pouring in, and that limits the oxygen going into the liquid.
Just trying to spin it in between your talking. All right, I'll hold it, you spin it.
You ready?
Yep. All right, that's on there. That's on there good. Okay, so what are we gonna do with this now?
We're gonna let it sit.
Give it another week. We'll wait till that kicks up fermentation again, and then wait till it stops fermentation again. It's gonna be a week, maybe 2 for us, but it might be like, 2 seconds for you. All right, so it's been another week, 7 days exactly. And last time it went dry, so we added half pound of honey, brought it up to 1.020, see what it did. Unfortunately, the week went by and I didn't look at this. So I don't know if it did anything. I have no idea. That's how you want to be as a brewer, where you kind of forget that you did something. Not in a bad way, just, you forget, oh, I have something brewing. This is very nice and clear. Is that floating? Nope. That's what you want in a step feed, though. You want it to keep going dry. Because every time it goes dry, that means the yeast can do more, okay? So this went to, oh wow, 0.996. See, normally I don't just dump it right back in, because you see all that? Yep.
But we're gonna be feeding it, so those yeast need to be doing their thing, so it's okay that they've been stirred up.
Now, I just want to do a quick little bit of math for you, because a lot of people ask, how do you calculate ABV for a step feed? And at this point, it's got 2 feeds, so we can do this. It's very, very simple in theory, but there's multiple steps. Basically, we have a primary and a finish, and then another primary and a finish, if you look at it from that perspective. So we have our first gravity reading of 1.078. We have our first final gravity reading of 0.994. And we have our second original gravity reading of 1.020 and our second final gravity of 0.996. You just subtract all of those from each other. So like 1.078 minus 0.994 is 0.084. Now I know 1.020 minus 0.996 is 0.024. So I'm just going to add 0.024 and we get 0.108 times 135, our coefficient of choice for calculating alcohol, and we get 14.58% ABV so far. But we're not done.
Now we need a scale.
Yep, and we need some honey.
Okay, so we got our honey on our scale. Or what am I saying? Okay, so we got our mead on our scale.
And I have here some leftover honey. I don't know how much is in there. It's from Jeremy Burke from Oregon. He sent us this. I think this is, I don't know. The label is gone.
It might have been blackberry. Yeah, it was blackberry.
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 Oh, but this is blackberry honey. So this goes perfectly with the theme. Now, you might be tempted to try to rinse this out with water.
Is this what you wanted for this?
Yeah, it's fine. You might be tempted to try to rinse this out with water to get more of the honey out. Here's the problem with that. Now you'd be diluting your mead, making the step feed take that much longer. What am I doing wrong?
I'm just holding it so you can talk.
Oh, okay. We're going to put in about half a pound, which is like 8 ounces, just to give it a little bit more and a little bit more. Basically, I think I mentioned this in an earlier part of this video. I never put in more than I would be happy with sweetening to. So in other words, this is like a 15% or 14% mead. I know I can drink this at a 1.020 and it won't be too sweet for me. If I was fine with 1.030, then I can add enough honey to bring it there. That way, that's the worst case scenario, right? So if I know 1.020 is pretty much, yeah, that's about as high as I'm comfortable with going sweet, then I'm going to add enough honey to get it there, which is about half a pound. So if I keep going that way I will never be disappointed, okay? Meaning worst case scenario, this stops and it doesn't ferment anymore. I have 1.020. It's sweet enough for me. It's good. If this ferments out, I can just add more honey. Make sense? I hope it makes sense. I probably talked in circles there. Okay, we have 2.6 ounces so far. That's nowhere near enough. Need more honey. Looking for 8 ounces altogether. I'm gonna beat you. I'll get there first. 8 ounces. Now I gotta wash my finger. All right, so now using a sanitized mixing device, I'm going to stir this up. Now, when you do this, you want to be careful that you don't introduce more oxygen than is necessary. I don't degas these, okay? So there is still gas buildup inside this on purpose. That way we have a little bit of a safety net for oxygenation. People ask about oxygenation all the time. Yes, it is something to be aware of. However, it's not something to be scared of. Just do your thing, do the best you can. You're not likely to oxidize. I will tell you that right now.
So when you're stirring, you're trying to limit the breaking of the surface at the top and maximizing the movement at the bottom. So if you angle your paddle kind of like that, then, you know, it'll do that. Words and things.
Yes. And again, you don't have to mix this up. I just want to so I can get a reading on it. Because technically speaking, it's going to ferment anyway, or it's not going to ferment anyway, one or the other. But if you know how much you put in, you can kind of estimate, but I'd rather take the reading, and that way I can show you exactly what we did. So far, this is going pretty good though. This is kind of like the textbook version of a step feed. I like the fact that we're just using random honeys that we have laying around. And honestly, some of it's like, okay, we have a lot of crystallized honey. Yeah, I can't use that now. We can start out with that, but you can't use that once it's already started. So one of these days, we're just going to take all that crystallized honey, put it into one jar, and melt it all down, and then use it in something. Do another Sweila. Stuff we had lying around.
That was
a wine.
Sweila was a wine, yeah.
Might have to do a Sweila Mead. This is sort of a Sweila Mead.
Yeah.
But not exactly. It's close. I'm just going to wait for 10 seconds. That way anything that's heavier than the liquid will drop to the bottom. Oh no. All right, we are mixed up.
Good to go.
That means take another reading. By the way, we do sanitize all this stuff. That's come up a couple times where people were asking. We sanitize everything. Just because you don't see us do it doesn't mean it didn't happen. There's a thing called editing, because it would be so boring to watch me sit here and check my phone while Derica sanitizes this stuff. You know, that's just not a lot of fun to watch. And if you say it is, I'm sorry, it's not happening. It's looking like 1.018. Again, like I said earlier, if it didn't ferment anymore and it ended at 1.018, it would be stable. See, like that cut right there where she just threw that in? You didn't have to see that, right? It would be stable, but it would be semi-sweet, and I would be okay with it being done at that stage. That's the critical thing. That's why I don't want to add too much more, because also too much more can shock the yeast and stop them altogether. So it's best to do small increments. Like next time, we're probably not going to add half a pound. We're probably going to add a quarter pound next time. Just go little by little until we get to where we want to be. Apparently there's somebody at the front door. Label goes back on. I have my notes.
Mead goes back in the fermentation station, and we'll see you next time for the next check.
In about 2 seconds. It has been 6 more days. Call it a week. It was at 1.018 when we last left it, with a half pound of honey added. It still smells like mead. I don't smell anything untoward. Everything about it smells right. So let's give it a reading. I didn't notice a lot of activity, so I don't know that this actually completed.
But it does have a nice layer of tiny bubbles, and I see ever so slightly occasional bubbles coming
okay,
up.
well, maybe it's still sort of percolating.
So it might just be slow.
Well, if it seems to have stopped, we'll probably just give it more time to sit. Rather than add more honey this time. Can always add more later.
Yeah.
It's not clearing at all.
Yeah.
That's usually not a great sign of fermentation having occurred or finished.
See all the gas?
Oh yeah, it's pretty gassy. It definitely fermented some. 1.004 is where it's at right now. What I'd like to do is just pour this back in, give it another week and see what happens. If it continues to go down, then we might add like just a little bit more honey and see if we can get it to keep going.
Once you put that in there, do you want to give it a bit of a swirl?
I'm totally going to give it a bit of a swirl.
It seems extra gassy.
It's very gassy, and that could actually prevent fermentation too. I just want to pour this kind of careful.
Do you want me to tilt?
Nope.
Okay.
I've mastered the art of the straight pour without making noise. I'm barely breaking until the end. Shh.
Yeah, see?
You didn't hear that. One other thing I want to do though before we put this on the shelf is I just want to give a running tally of how much alcohol we've made so far, because, you know, it's a sack mead. It's meant to be up there. I'm a little disappointed if it's stalled, or, well, not stalled, if it's stopped.
It's just slowed. I don't think it's...
I can't seem to find the threads.
I know, you were akimbo.
What I want to do is calculate where we're at for our alcohol percentage at this point in time. And we're going to just take it from the top. So we have 1.078 minus 0.994. That gives us 0.084, or 84 points of gravity used up. Then our second addition, first addition, but second bout of fermentation, if you will, we added a half pound of honey, and that brought it up to 1.020, and that finished at 0.996, giving us 0.024 gravity used up, or 24 points, however you like to think of it. And then our third bout, which we just tested today, we brought it up to 1.018 with another half pound of honey, and it ended at 1.004, 0.014 specific gravity, or 14 points of gravity. So now I add those numbers up. I know this is a lot of math. It's hard for me to say it all. You know how many takes it took for me to get here? Okay, we've used 122 points, or 0.122, times 135 gives us 16.47%. Because we used EC 1118 makes me think we still have a ways to go. But this is kind of slowing down, so I don't know.
Even that said, the 16.47% is an approximation because we constantly are adding honey.
Yeah, we are changing the volume, so it's around 16%-ish. That's the best we got. By the way, I'm doing this to degas as well as get everything all shook up. This is not oxygenating.
But the reason why we took the airlock off is if you saw, it just started erupting because there was lots of gas in there.
I'm getting bubbles on my fingers in the top here as I was doing that. That's how bubbly this is. And now I just want to give it a little more to make sure.
That's still...
Oh, yeah.
Need to do.
I just like to.
You do.
It's
you really
fun.
Do.
If you're not having fun at what you're doing, you should be doing something else. So I'm going to do it again. That's just crazy. Now, I will probably degas this a few more times over the next couple hours and the next couple of days, just to make sure that it has all the benefit that it can possibly have. Some people might say, oh, you should add nutrients at this point. That's not a great idea. Nutrients past a certain point really don't help, and they can actually end up flavoring it a little bit. So
we
it's not
already
something
have 10 grams of Fermate O in here. I really don't want to add more.
If they used all that up, that's on them.
The most I would be happy with doing is maybe adding some yeast hulls.
If we feel the need, but I don't think we really.
I don't feel it's necessary at all.
Look at the...
No.
It's super gassy. Now, I've seen where gas can sometimes alter the reading, so there could be that involved, but also that much gas in there could prohibit further fermentation. So we'll just give it the best chance we got, put it back on the shelf, and see in about 2 seconds.
Yeah.
It's been 7 days. That airlock, I don't know that it moved all that much, but let's take a check on it anyway.
All right, so there's a couple of things that we look at.
Put that on there good, didn't we?
When we are doing fermentations that are visual cues onto whether a fermentation is done or not. One of them is the bubbles in the airlock. That doesn't mean anything. It just means something has happened at some point. Other than that, not much to go on.
Oh, that's right. This is the one that's honey, yeast, Fermate O, water, wine tannin.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Smells like a mead.
Smells like a mead. So we weren't seeing much bubble activity. We're looking carefully at the sides. I don't see any of the telltale signs of little bubbles coming up the side, which is another sign.
Be honest, I just kind of put this in the fermentation station and let it do its thing.
But there's something that I'm noticing visually about this that is making me go,
What's that?
And that's that it's not really clearing.
No, it's got a haze.
It's seriously hazy. So what does that mean from my knowledge? Apparently it means Jack, put your explicitive of choice there. But normally
It blew through it.
it means that it's not, never mind. I'm just going to stop talking now because
I was under the assumption that this was going to be done. 1.000. Like, totally dry. Now, it had been going to 996 and 994, so it's getting closer. You can tell.
slowing down. So at this stage, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead with another honey addition because this is our step feed, but we're probably going to reduce the amount because it is slowing down. And
I've been adding a ½ pound, I think a ¼ pound.
Yeah.
Now, my rule of thumb, though, is you never want to add more than what you can tolerate in sweetness level. So a ¼ pound is something like 1.008 gravity-ish. I think we can actually go more. Like, usually I like meads around a 1.020. So I think a ½ pound is still appropriate.
½ pound is still, okay.
Now, this is where the choice has to get made. We are at a point with the yeast that it's up there, okay? It's made a decent amount of alcohol.
Do we know what that is now?
I can check that in just a second. And that's where that turning point matters, because if I put in a ½ pound right now, it's possible we're so close that it's going to stress the yeast and it won't go any further. But if I only put in a ¼ pound, it might actually burn through it all. So you have to be careful. It's kind of like if you're in a very congested area and you leave earlier, you can actually get there later. And then if you leave later, you can get there before. Yeah, let me figure out the alcohol.
All right, we're not going to do all the math this time.
No, because I'm at 16.47% from last time.
We've done it multiple times through this video.
So we added honey to, we didn't write down the last time. I didn't write down what my number was last time.
Do we need to go look at the
I need to go check the old footage and find out what my number was. I'll be right back.
Pardon.
So after checking the footage, it turns out that we didn't actually add any honey last time around. And see, here's the thing. That's just a weird thing. I didn't have it in my notes, and it wasn't in my notes because we didn't do it.
Right. So before now, we were at 1.004, and now we're at 1.000.
But what are we looking at now?
Now is now.
But what was before?
That was then.
Yeah. Welcome to our life. This is what it's like.
So we have made a consensus. We are going to go ahead and add some honey, but we're only going to add
1/4 of a pound, 4 ounces.
Why?
About 112 grams.
Because we know we're going to probably want to back sweeten this anyway. Yeah. So if it doesn't ferment anymore, we're probably still going to be okay. But if it does continue to ferment, as it seems to be slowing down and doing so, we will be continuing our step feed. So it's a win-win.
Yep.
Oh, you got to take the lid off.
Helps to take the cap off. Kind of like with photography.
Yeah.
This is a heavily crystallized honey. It's probably going to take a while to get.
This one doesn't time out, does it?
Yes, it does.
Oh.
I will figure it out.
Do you want me to?
Nope, we're good.
Okay.
Okay, this one's too crystallized. I give up. Go back to the old standby. Good old Kirkland Costco honey. Whoa. Careful. Don't need that much. So we got our 4 ounces of honey added.
Let's take a note.
Yeah. Notes.
You need a stirring paddle.
I need a stirring paddle, please. She wasn't prepared for that. Proper paddle preparation is important.
Paddle.
Paddle prepared. It's like mischief managed.
Yes.
It did get a couple of big bubbles on the surface a few days ago, which I thought was a little strange, but they seem to have diminished. So something was going on. It did go down 4 more points. So obviously, you know, a little bit of activity.
Do we need to take another gravity reading?
Oh, yeah. Okay. I got to know what it's at.
Oh, we got all our stuff. Okay, good. Phew.
But it's only a ¼ pound, but it was sort of crystallized. So
to make sure my job was done.
I don't know that this is going to mix in well.
Yeah, I see a blob.
It's clumpy.
I don't know if that's, I'm assuming that's honey.
It's honey. Remember, this was
the super crystallized.
Super crystallized. I got like 1.3 or 1.5 ounces of the crystallized stuff out before I just said no. It was just too much.
So ideally, we would want to lightly warm the crystallized vessel so that way they would liquefy. That's the word. But even though we know that's what we're supposed to do,
Ain't nobody got time for that.
we don't ever seem to do that.
We just need to like get a big vat of hot water and just leave all of our honey in it. We have like 7 or 8 various.
I finished one. I use it for tea. So I like scrape it out, and then when I just have the leave-ins, I just pour the hot water for my tea in the honey vessel and then swirl it around and dump that into my tea.
By the way, before anybody freaks out, just like we always say, I'm trying not to oxidize this. I'm being careful. But I do see like little bits of brown, which is the honey, every now and then.
So we need that to be dissolved and distributed evenly. Otherwise,
just for a reading.
Our reading's not going to be accurate. So,
but it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. It's just, you know, to get a semi-accurate reading. I'm calling it. This is taking too much time.
All right.
Sometimes the honey like that just doesn't mix well.
And our ABV final adjustment is going to be an estimate at best, so we're not overly concerned about it.
Yeah, so we were at 1.000. I expected to only get like 8 points out of that, and I actually got 10. So 1.010. So my point is, if it doesn't ferment anymore at all, 1.010 is sweetened. Okay, and it's stable sweetened. That's the thing. This doesn't need pasteurization. This doesn't need fortification. This isn't a third way to go without having to stabilize.
So what are we going to do now? We're going to let this sit. I'm just answering the questions that I knew were coming. But we want this to either continue fermenting,
or do nothing.
What our hope was, or do absolutely nothing.
Because if it only goes down a couple of points, I got to let it sit another week after that to see, you know, and it's just, it gets old.
But there are some concerns that I have now that are something we can work with.
What are your concerns?
The clarity.
Oh, it'll clear.
Or lack thereof.
It'll clear. We have other things, other methods that we have not really played around with much on the channel to clear brew.
So this might be an opportunity to utilize those. Yeah.
Talking about bentonite.
All right. So see you in a couple of seconds, which will be a week for us.
It's been sitting for a week. Notice that airlock? See, it's just kind of like that, but it's not moving. I don't see any bubbles. So guess what we're going to do? We're going to take a reading. Okay, smelling it, it smells like a young mead still. It doesn't smell untoward. There's no weirdness. There's no, you know, eyeballs looking back at me. It didn't blink when I looked into the fermenter, okay? 1.006, which means it went down 4 points in the week, okay? It's getting close to the end here. I think what we're going to do is just put it back in, let it go another week, see what happens. We were at 16.47% alcohol before the last edition. The last edition only burned through 4 points, so 0.004 times 135 is 0.54 plus 16.47 gives us 17%, 17.01 according to my calculations, which means we're at about 17% alcohol, which is still lower than the ABV tolerance of EC1118. And I always find this interesting. We have yet to see EC1118 actually get to 18%.
Yeah.
I don't think we've ever actually had it happen. I see people all the time that say, oh, I get 20% on EC. Okay, I don't know if it's environment differences or things like that, but we've not had it. I think we've had 71B go to 17.5.
Yeah.
We're going to give it some more time.
At this point, do you want to risk giving it a gentle swirl just to see how much gas might be trapped in there?
Quite a bit. So here's what I'm going to do. Swirling can often help to get things moving again, but it also degasses. Degassing can actually help things ferment. I took the airlock out for a reason. I would have exploded it because I'm not shaking, I'm stirring. See this? Swirling. So what's happening is all that CO2 is coming out, forcing, there's probably a jet coming out of this. Like, I don't know if you can feel it. No, you can't, obviously. But it's pushing all the air out that hole. And this could probably be done for like 20 minutes if I really wanted to.
Now, there are many other methods of degassing. This is just the down and dirty,
simplest most efficient
way.
when it's still in the fermenter.
But as you can see, the pressure in the airlock, it's still pushing gas out, and it should be bubbling.
See?
Like that.
See those on top? That's why I didn't want it to...
But we wanted to do that after putting the airlock on, just to hope to limit oxygenation.
So what are we going to do now?
We're going to let it sit.
See you in a week. Okay, it's been 9 more days. The airlock was not showing any activity. I don't really think it did any activity at all. It was not activitous.
It wasn't active.
It had no activity. It did nothing. So let's just take a reading and see where we're at. It smells like mead. I'm going to say it hasn't moved, 1.006. So it's done, basically. It's just not going to move anymore. So here's our options. We can leave it for another week. It's stable at 1.006 twice right now.
Sure.
Or we can rack it. What do you think we should do?
I don't know.
Well, I need to know before I pour this back in.
Sure. What are your thoughts? Do you think we should just go ahead and rack it? I mean, we did our double check.
I mean, right now we know it's sitting at, it's at about 18%, 17.8%. We use DC 1118. That's about as much as we can expect from it. What are we going to do? Could we try to get it to go a little further? Maybe. But yeah, let's leave it. I'm just going to pour the sample back in. Let's let this clear some more before we rack it.
That's probably a good idea.
Yeah, because again, proving there's no reason to rush. Plus, who knows? Maybe it will knock out a couple more points over time.
Do you tilt it or?
No. Okay. Well, yeah, because I don't want to oxidize. But this is one of those examples of you don't necessarily have to rack it right away. Did that just pop on me?
It did.
Nope, it's on.
Okay.
Okay. And I just want to swirl. So yeah, you don't have to rack it right away. We can leave it in here for months before we do anything with it. There's a lot of gas in there. That could be preventing it from going a little further.
Yeah, I did notice when you are putting the liquid in the test tube.
It was gassy.
It was gassy.
Okay, let's do it this way. Take that off, and I'm just gonna... Best thing that I can do with this right now is just keep doing that until there's none left. Like until there's almost none. Because I do have a bit of headroom here. I don't want to completely degas. I'd like it to stay with a little bit of CO2 in there. But that's a lot. And that's probably why it's not going fully dry. But it's okay. I'll do that off camera. It goes back on the shelf for another week.
We'll see you then.
We left this for a few weeks to settle out and see if it was really going to go through those last 6 points. We loosened the lid early. So let's take a reading and find out just to make sure, because it was at 1.006. That means it wasn't quite done, but it might have just given up and passed the tolerance of what that yeast could really do, and that's the end. Looks like 1.004 to me, so I'm going to write that down. So what are we going to do with this now?
We're going to rack it.
Yep, we're going to rack it over to another 1 gallon, and we're going to put it on the shelf and let it sit some more. All right, so I have my sample going into this carefully, because if I pour it into there, I'm going to disturb all the lees and make racking kind of pointless.
So for our normal racking procedure, we put our destination lower than our source. We get out our
auto siphon and tubing. I'm leaving the cap on. There's a lot of lees in the bottom here. I don't want it in my bottle, but this is why we do the racking procedure the way we do. That way, any lees that gets in there, it's going to sit for a week or 2 and fall out before we move on to the next step. We have a dedicated racking video on how to do this, but you just saw it. That's pretty much what you do. Pretty decent amount of headspace there, which means not too much. And we're just going to put the airlock and bung back on it. Our notes. Now what are we going to do with it?
We're going to let it sit.
Give it another week or 2. We'll be back to show you. Okay, it's been sitting for 2 weeks. It's time to rack this and do our adjustment tasting on it. So racking, you've seen this before. We're going to move it from here to here. Time for a taste. When we last checked it, it was 1.004, so it had a little bit of residual sweetness left. It's the tiniest bit of haze. Good color. It smells nice. Remember, this is just a bunch of different honeys put together. You taste it. That's why I gave it to you. Ladies first and all. Being a gentleman. It smells very honey forward. Tastes like a kind of a light white wine.
There's honey in the afternoon in particular.
Now, some people have said that they'd like to see us do more with balancing flavors. This is sort of a traditional mead at this point. So, in true traditional, which we don't really care about such things because we're not competitors, you can't really add a lot of things. So we're going to throw those rules out the window, and we're going to add whatever we feel like adding to make this taste better.
Well, first of all, I need a lot more honey.
It does need a lot more honey.
It's got that, like, almost bitter, but not bitter. Like, bitter's not the right word.
This isn't very old. I mean, we started this November 1st.
I'm feeling the tannin. I don't think it needs more tannin. We added wine tannin initially, and I think it did its job.
It needs acid.
It does need acid.
It needs brightness and it needs sweetness. So
yeah.
Let's start with sweetness, and then we'll add some brightness, and we'll alter that.
We're just going to do gravity reading sweetness adjustments.
Yeah,
right? Okay.
Yeah. We like to use the gravity reading at the end rather than the amount added. If you have a different amount of alcohol, yeah, it does alter it slightly, but you're probably not going to be more than a point or two away from what we did. If you are, then know that you're not going to get the same thing we did anyway.
And even though we say, well, this is what our gravity reading is, we really try to urge, and maybe it's not coming across, we want you to sweeten it to your preference.
Yes. This is your mead, not ours. Sweeten it to your tastes.
The ending really doesn't matter what ours is what tastes good to you. Sweeten it to there.
Yep. And I put in a pretty decent amount to start with because we both kind of had the feeling like, yeah, this needs to be a lot sweeter. Come on, stop. Stop.
It's got a gloopy.
It's got a bubble.
You got me. Oh, Elizabeth, I'm coming for you.
Who's Elizabeth?
Isn't that what he says?
I don't know. What are you talking about?
Oh, golly, you don't get that reference?
I've heard it. I don't know what it's from. I need a mixation device. So when you're doing the sweeten to taste method, it's very important to mix it up thoroughly. Now, something we hadn't considered, off camera, we were like, oh, we have to plan this out because we have to pasteurize this. No, we don't. This was a step feed.
Oh, this is a step feed.
This is stable. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to leave it in the bottle under airlock when we're done.
Just in case.
We'll talk about that later.
I totally forgot about that. Beautiful.
Yeah, me too.
Yay!
That's an advantage to going beyond the tolerance of the yeast. There's a few ways to make a stable brew. One of them is pasteurization, another one is exceeding the tolerance of the yeast, and another one is chemical stabilization.
And you might say, well, what about fortification? Well, fortification
Actually, that is too.
Is exceeding the tolerance of the yeast, though.
Well, yeah,
It's
it's a different way of doing it, but fortification is, yeah. So I was right, there's 3 ways. Actually, there's probably more.
Yeah.
A little more honey smell. I didn't put a lot in.
It's better. Still got some ways to go, but it's better.
You want that sweeter? I think it needs the acid now.
Let's do the acid. And can we use acid blend since it's right here?
Yeah, we're going to use acid blend.
A citric.
I was considering using lemon juice to do this one.
Yeah. But it's behind all our gear.
Yeah, it's in the fridge and it's behind all our gear. Acid blend is really just, obviously it's a processed product, but it is really just the acids in powder form. We use it honestly like all the time. It's very convenient. But if you wanted to, you could just use lemon juice to bring the brightness up. It's going to add a little bit of a lemony flavor as well. However,
the measuring device.
Question always arises, how much do you use? Because if you listen to what this says, 1 teaspoon per gallon increases acidity by 0.1%. What does that mean? Well, I'm actually not an expert in this kind of thing, and I know that pH changes logarithmically. It's not a sliding scale. It's like a curve. From past experience, though, when we've needed quite a bit more acid, I've used a full teaspoon, so I'm using a full teaspoon. I know I used to do a half teaspoon and then another half teaspoon. I think the full might be enough. We might even need more. And now, let me explain some of the balancing that we're doing. Tannin, sweetness, and acidity are the 3 basics. There's a lot more flavor components. There's a lot more compounds that can alter flavors. But in a very basic sense, those 3 are the things that you really want to aim for most. So we have the tannic quality going for it because we added tannins to this. Yep, we put wine tannin in this. We could have used tea if we wanted to. So we have the tannic quality. That's coming through fine. Now we got the sweetness higher. It might not be there yet, but it's close. Now I want to get that brightness level, the acidity level, the bite of it closer to see, does it need more sweetness or not? This is part of the fun of homebrewing for me, this is the mad scientist part. This is where you get to put your own personal bias into that brew. This is where you fine tune it to taste the way you want it to. That is pretty good. I think it needs a little more brightness though. Just a touch more acidity. Do you see the difference though? I'm gonna go another half teaspoon. I'm gonna eyeball a half teaspoon.
Yeah, that helped it a lot.
Yeah, it's amazing how you can take a kind of a meh brew with a little bit of acidity, brighten that right up. It's just like in cooking, you know, if you add lemon juice to a dish, it brightens it up. It can make those flavors pop even more. And that's what I'm getting. The florals of the honeys are now popping a lot more than they were before. And that, you know, that's what a mead is about. It's about that floralness of the honey, the slight astringency of the honey, the tanginess and the sweetness. All those things play a part. That said, if you don't want to do these things, don't. This is fine just the way it was. You could have put it in a bottle, let it sit for a year and drink it in a year, or drink it right away if you like it. I don't even think it needs more sweetness now.
That is amazing. To be honest, I really wasn't digging this. I was like, yeah. Now I'm like, I could totally drink this.
Yep. Now, I want to put this back into a fermenter. We're going to put an airlock on it. We're going to let it sit for a while. Make sure it doesn't ferment any further, but I do need to take a hydrometer reading for you. We are going to give you a hydrometer reading on this now so that we can tell you, you know, where to aim for, basically.
Oh, Brian is doing this. I want to just talk a little bit more about balance and what we did here and how that would differ on a different brew. Now, this was basically, as Brian said, a traditional. It was mostly just honey. That's
mostly.
So we didn't have a lot of other things going on. We knew that honey is naturally slightly acidic, but as far as the flavor profile goes, it doesn't come across acidic on the palate. So the brightness and the things that were missing, the bitterness getting in the way of the sweetness, and all those adjustments were based on this particular brew. So adding the acid blend to this really truly improved it. It brought it to a place that really was unpleasant for me to a very enjoyable place. And it was just a teaspoon and a half in addition in this entire pitcher. So that should tell you something about that. Now, if this was a melomel, say with an acidic fruit, such as cranberry, then it probably wouldn't need the acid blend. In fact, it might have even needed to be adjusted to be less acidic for the yeast to ferment it in the first place.
That's true.
These are things you need to take in consideration when you're going to the finishing stage where we're at right now with this brew, with whatever brew you're working with, is that not all things are equal. Everything is different based on the ingredients of your brew.
By the way, we sweetened this to 1.012, so it's considered a mildly sweet. In our general experience, it's mildly sweet.
Did you take a note, or?
I took a note.
You took a note. Excellent. Did you add the acid blend?
I did.
Excellent.
So we left it for like 3 weeks. Why? Because, well, there's just no rush. We wanted to let it clear out, settle, do its thing, maybe a little touch of age. You know, 3 weeks isn't much, but it's better than nothing. And no, we're gonna give it a score after we take a taste. Gotta taste it before you can give the score.
That's usually how that works.
Yeah, I mean, I can guess, but it's not necessarily going to be what we want it to be. It's got the slightest bit of haze, and when I describe that, I'm just doing it to describe it. It's not really a judgment call of any kind, because that amount of haze means nothing. Some people might get offended by it, but
we don't.
Yeah, if you handed this to somebody and they got offended by that haze, you know what? Take it back and don't give them any more. The color is beautiful.
Yeah, it's the typical goldenrod of mead, and that makes me happy because that's what I expect when I'm drinking a mead.
Yeah.
And as this is basically just honey, then that's a good color for it.
It's made from honey.
The aroma is far more complex than I was anticipating.
Yeah, we did some finagling with this one.
Yep.
We added honey to it, and I have notes right here. And we did a little bit of acid blend in this one. Now, there's also wine tannin added in the beginning. Not a lot of wine tannin.
I feel like I'm getting the acid blend on the aroma. Are you? Do you?
I don't know that it's really acidic. Definitely floral and honey, though. Like, this is, and this was all different kinds of honey. This leftover honey is what this is.
Yeah.
Honestly, for just a thrown together thing, this actually smells really good. It's a very enjoyable smell. I would say one of the better.
I'm getting earthy
smelling
notes. I'm getting lemony notes. I'm getting floral notes. I'm getting honey notes.
Could the acids maybe be aspirating some of the
Yeah, I think
aromas into your nose? Into your nose holes.
so. My nose holes.
All right, I'm going in.
I feel violated somehow.
That is like thick, mouth-filling. And you're right, the kind of the lemony thing.
Ooh.
There's a very citrusy lemony thing
like
going
it.
on. Oh yeah.
I like it right up front. It's like honey, but it's not, like Brian said, it was thick, but to me it's not that syrupy,
Oh no,
cloying.
it's not syrup. It's mouth-filling.
It's mouth-filling, yes, absolutely. But right after that, boom, honey shot, I started getting the lemony notes and
a little bit of a bite from the acid blend.
a touch of other citrus as well.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say all the ones that are coming to mind.
No, I'm just going to say citrus in general.
Those of you who've seen many of our videos probably know
Talking
what
about
I'm
grapefruit.
referring to.
I don't get a direct grapefruit. I get a very, very slight hint of grapefruit. I'm getting more lemon orange, even almost a lime kind of thing. But there's a bit of a floral note in the aroma.
It's like
doesn't
that-
really come through in the taste.
That citrus tree where they like graft all the
Yeah.
citrus on one tree. That's what it's like in a glass with honey.
Yeah, it has just, honestly, I think adding the acid blend really changed this. It has just
And
enough.
we noticed that right when we were doing
Yes.
that.
Yep. It took
That-
this from a
It took it from
to
like
a
a-
whoa.
Yeah. And now that it's had that time to sit, it's a nice beverage.
Yeah, it's really interesting because you're getting the full honey flavors and then that kind of acidic little backbone to it. Really gives it some character.
Yeah. Yeah.
Love that.
I could see enjoying this on its own and enjoying the experience of it because it does have all those different layers and nuances.
Right.
I can see pairing this with food, pretty much full spectrum of food. I can see drinking this chilled after doing yard work.
Yeah.
Those are like my three categories that normally come to mind when
This is like a semi-sweet. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not a dessert. It
Nope.
could be drank with food, no problem. Like you said,
Yep.
And basically it's an anytime mead.
It is an anytime
Now,
mead.
the one thing that I'd like to say is this is 16%. Okay, I'm assuming it's about 16 because we did dilute it a little bit with the honey, so it was like 16.5 or so. But diluted with the honey, I'm gonna say 16%. That is a little surprising.
The alcohol percentage is not being read in the experience.
Oh, actually, you know what we need to do? We need to make sure that it didn't ferment more.
Oh, right.
Yeah, we never did that. So grab me the hydrometer. Let's do that. If you're wondering what I'm talking about, because this was a step feed, we fed it until it stopped. And then we fed it some more to make it a little bit sweet. But we didn't do any sort of stabilization. We didn't do any pasteurizing or anything like that.
Right.
So I want to make sure that it didn't actually ferment some of that.
Because we did add
meantime.
more honey, which is a fermentable sugar, after we were done fermenting because that was our flavor addition.
Nope, did not ferment at all. 1.012 still. So that's beautiful, which is what's expected.
Yeah.
So this is another proof of something. We used EC1118 yeast for this, which is an 18% champagne yeast. This is 16%, but it's stable.
Yeah.
It didn't stall. This is stable. We kept adding, if you watch the whole video, we kept adding until it stopped. Then we let it sit for a while, and it still didn't do anything. Should I pour that back in?
We're
Are you going to have any more?
No, I'm ready to do my numbers.
Okay, then I'm going to pour it back in because
Yeah.
it's going to have. The reason why we're having some trepidation is because it could hit the lees cake on the bottom. There's a little bit of dusting there, and it'll, make it come back up. But this is going to sit for probably a month or two before we bottle it anyway. We just like to do that now, lets things clear out and clean up after themselves, so to speak.
All right, so our first score is our repeatability score, and this is how easy do we think it would be for you, a viewer, to replicate this. And I'm going to give it a lower number.
I'm going to give it a 5
I'm going to agree with that
because you would have
5.
to have all the same honeys we did and have everything happen the way we did to
We
make
don't
what we did.
even remember, because we really didn't pay attention, to be
Yeah.
honest, what honeys we used.
Yeah,
So we
because
just
that
got
was the
random-
point, is to just put random stuff in.
Right.
But could you replicate this method with any old honey and get it to somewhere in this kind of vicinity?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
No problem.
No problem. So for that, it's a 10.
Yeah.
But in reality, to get exactly what we have, it's like a 4 to a 5.
It's a crap
It's
shoot.
even a 3 because you need exactly the amounts of honey that we had. And I don't even think we measured half the
We
time.
just did stuff.
We just threw a bunch of stuff in a bottle and let it ferment. I'm joking,
And
but we kind of did.
sometimes we get criticized for that, but we
Sometimes.
actually do that on purpose because we want to show you how easy it is and how, even though the procedures and the science behind it are exact, the process itself doesn't necessarily have to be exact to get something good to eat, drink. Good to drink. That's what we're doing here. So hopefully that gets conveyed in our process and that we don't look like a couple of chuckleheads, but we're actually teaching you and trying to encourage you to experiment and try new things. And all the details that we cram into each of our videos are tools for you to use so that way if you feel like you need an adjustment, you know how to go.
Yeah, I mean, it's really easy to have made a recipe 15,000 times and just say, add this, add this, add this, add this, wait this amount of time, and it's done, and here's what it tastes like. That's a really easy thing to do. I would much rather show you all the stuff that goes wrong along the way, because that's what really happens. You can copy someone's recipe exactly, and it'll come out different, and it might not even work the same way. So this is how we do it.
Yeah, it's more than a recipe. It's the tool set for you to go beyond that recipe.
We're not giving you a fish. We're teaching you to fish.
That's right. Also, another thing that what I meant to say earlier when I was like, do we have any more talking to do, is about our yeast and why we didn't make it to 18%. We, in this particular environment of this particular part of Florida, in this particular house,
we've never gotten EC 1118.
We've never got EC 1118 to go to 18%, but we have had...
We had 71B go to like 17.5.
Yeah, so...
We had bread yeast go to 15.5. EC 1118? Never. K1V 1116? Nope, can't get it to 18.
So it's just our little weirdness in this particular...
Yeah, it bothers me. It does. It bothers me.
It does. But that
because I hear from people who say, "Oh, I just threw a bunch of yeast and honey and water, and it went to 18% with these." I'm like,
"That's awesome."
Yeah.
Anyway, so I just want to put that out there that isn't a slight on us, and it isn't a slight on you if you're having similar issues. It's that
your environment has
this entire thing has a lot to do on the specifics of your environment.
Yeah, we don't
keep that in mind.
We don't get too into temperature control, okay? That is a thing. It's more important for beer, in my opinion, but it is important for mead as well and any kind of fermentation. We tend to just let the temperature of our house work, but our house only fluctuates by 3 or 4 degrees from day to night. So it's not that different. Now, if your house fluctuates 10 or 20 degrees from day to night, you may want to look into some amount of temperature control. We don't really talk about it much because we go off of our experiences and that's all we really have to work from. But the next score
is our personal preference score.
Yep, and it goes 1 through 10 with the occasional 11. I'll have a blurb up here of what the scores actually mean, but basically 10 is better, 1 is lower, and I'm empty.
You're empty again?
Yeah, I'm not going to refill.
All right, you recall what you want?
No, I do need to refill. The things that I look for are, does the smell and the taste match? In this case, pretty darn close.
Yep. I mean, a complex odor, aroma, whatever.
Odor. I think the aroma is a little more floral than the taste, but that's about the biggest criticism there.
But the complexity.
Oh yeah, this has layers. There's
Yeah.
layers. This is an onion. This is
It's an ogre.
an ogre. Yep. I have a score. Are you ready?
I'm conflicted on these numbers because I don't like numbers. Numbers are not my thing. And so sometimes I feel I have number guilt.
Well, I mean, basically to me, like 7 is a breaking point. 7.5 is great. 7 is very good.
Yeah. All right.
Below 5 is not so good. So it's kind of that kind of range-ish, sort of.
All right.
A little bit.
Go.
You ready?
Yes.
1, 2, 3, 7.
7.5.
I was debating on 7.5 and 7. I was
in between
right on that tipping
7.5
point.
and 8 because I'm really appreciating the layers. And if, again, you've watched many of our videos, you know that's my thing. That's my wheelhouse. Does it have a bunch of shit going on? Oh, I said the word. This does. And that pleases me. Now, is it my particular flavor profile? No, because I'm a fruity girl. I like all the fruits.
But it is a little fruity.
It's got the citrus thing, which is kind of making me happy. So that's why I'm like 7.5, 8.
And just for the record, there is no citrus in this.
It's just
You've
that
been watching,
acid
you're not
blend
confused.
magic.
It's just the way the flavors of the honeys worked. There could have been orange blossom honey
I'm
in
pretty
here.
sure there was.
So that could give sort of those notes. And the acid blend, like you said, can bring that out more. I went 7. I can even be convinced to go 7.5. I'm like smack in the middle. This is very, very good to great as far as my taste goes. That's the easiest way I can describe it. It is mead. If you've never had mead before, and this was the first mead you ever had, you would want to go home and make all the mead you can because it's that kind of good. It's better than any mead I've ever had at a Ren Fair. I know people get great meads at Ren Fairs. We don't.
We don't.
Okay? This is better than 90% of the commercial meads I've ever had.
There was that one time at a Ren Fair, at one time in band camp.
Yeah, there was a guy
when
selling.
The guy, that guy.
His mead was pretty good.
His was good.
Yeah.
The normal
Fair.
stuff, nope.
No, not good. Especially when the person serving it asks you, what was the question?
Do you want mead, honey wine,
Yeah.
or I don't know.
It was a really weird way of asking.
like-
And I just kind of looked at her and smiled and went,
Okay.
yeah, I don't think I'm going to even
Oh no,
try
it was
to
like,
explain.
do you want mead or honey mead? I think it was
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
like, seriously?
Yeah.
Anyway. So yeah, that is it for our leftover step feed mead.
So try this if you have leftover honey. And as always, guys, thank you so much for watching and have a great day.
Bye-bye.